The sickening sound of a body tumbling down wooden stairs made my blood run cold. I froze halfway out of my Jeep, grocery bags clutched in one hand, car keys in the other, watching in horror as my wife Rachel, 7 months pregnant with our first child, fell backwards down the 5-porch steps of our new home. Time seemed to slow as I witnessed her desperate attempt to protect her belly, her hands instinctively cradling our unborn daughter as she landed hard on the concrete walkway below. Victoria Harrington stood at the top of the stairs, her platinum bob perfectly unmoved despite the November breeze, designer boots planted firmly on our welcome mat, her hand still extended from the shove she just delivered to my wife's chest. The satisfied smirk on her face turned my stomach faster than any war zone atrocity I'd witnessed during my deployments. "I told you those lights are not permitted," she screamed, her voice carrying across our quiet cul-de-sac like an air raid siren. Her face had turned an alarming shade of red that clashed violently with her expensive camel-colored cashmere coat. The HOA Christmas decoration policy clearly states no decorations until December 1st and only in the approved silver and gold palette. These, she gestured contemptuously at the multicolored string lights in Rachel's hands, are a complete violation of community standards. I was out of the car in seconds, dropping everything, sprinting across our perfectly manicured lawn toward Rachel, who lay on the walkway curled protectively around her swollen belly, her face contorted in pain. The colorful string of Christmas lights she'd been hanging lay tangled around her legs like festive restraints, a mockery of the holiday spirit they were meant to represent. A small trickle of blood ran from where her head had hit the concrete, and the sight of it triggered the battlefield emergency response training that had been drilled into me during 15 years of military service. Had this woman, this HOA president with her clipboard and luxury handbag, really just pushed my pregnant wife down a flight of stairs over Christmas lights? Was this actually happening in suburban America, on my own property, in broad daylight? My name is James Ramirez. Until yesterday afternoon, I was simply a logistics officer enjoying a rare leave before the holiday rush, the first Christmas I'd be home for in 3 years. Today I was about to become the man who taught Victoria Harrington that some lines should never be crossed, and that actions, no matter how small they might seem to the perpetrator, can sometimes trigger consequences beyond imagination. Let me back up. I'm Lieutenant Colonel James Jax Ramirez, U.S. Army, currently serving as the logistics commander for the 5th Special Operations Support Battalion based at Fort Preston. Most of my career involves ensuring that the right equipment gets to the right places at the right time. A job that's both intensely demanding and critically important, though rarely glamorous or acknowledged in war stories. I've spent 15 years making sure our operators have everything they need when they need it, wherever they are in the world, from Baghdad to Kandahar, from Somalia to undisclosed locations that don't officially exist on any map. I've coordinated supply chains that keep our men and women in uniform equipped, fed, and operational. My reputation in the military is built on 2 things: meticulous attention to detail and an uncanny ability to call in favors when conventional channels fail. In my line of work, knowing who to call and when can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. I've built relationships across all branches of service, cultivating a network that spans from Pentagon offices to forward operating bases. General Thomas Steele Blackwood had been my commanding officer during my 2nd deployment, and we'd maintained a close friendship ever since. He now commanded Fort Preston and oversaw several specialized training operations, including the winter readiness exercise currently underway. My wife Rachel is a military psychologist specializing in trauma care for returning combat veterans. With her doctorate from Northwestern and 3 published papers on PTSD treatment protocols, she's respected throughout the Department of Veterans Affairs for her innovative approach to healing invisible wounds. We'd met at a deployment readiness conference 5 years ago, where her presentation on supporting families during extended deployments had captivated me as much as her brilliant mind and warm smile. After a whirlwind romance conducted largely over secure video calls from 3 different time zones, we'd married 2 years ago in a small ceremony on base, with General Blackwood himself officiating. Rachel understood the military life in ways civilian spouses often couldn't. She knew what it meant when I received calls at odd hours, why certain aspects of my work remained classified even from her, and how to read the subtle tension in my shoulders after difficult operational decisions. I'd fallen in love with her compassion first, the gentle way she spoke to traumatized soldiers, her unwavering patience, her ability to hold space for pain without being consumed by it. Later came my appreciation for her intellect, her dry humor, and her remarkable resilience. This was our first home together, a charming colonial in Oakwood Heights, an upscale neighborhood in Northern Virginia with tree-lined streets and meticulously maintained common areas. We'd chosen it specifically for its proximity to both my base and the VA hospital where Rachel consulted part-time. After years of base housing and temporary apartments in 5 different states and 2 countries, we'd been thrilled to find somewhere permanent, somewhere we could finally put down roots and prepare for our daughter's arrival. The nursery was painted a soft sage green with woodland animals stenciled along one wall. Rachel's project during her second trimester when nesting instincts kicked in alongside her creative side. We'd moved in just 4 weeks ago, and I'd spent every spare moment painting the nursery, assembling furniture, installing safety features, and preparing our home for the baby. Rachel, despite my protestations that she should rest, insisted on making the house festive for the holidays. Since I would be managing a major equipment transport exercise over actual Christmas week, overseeing the movement of critical supplies to 3 different training locations, we decided to decorate early and celebrate our own private Christmas this weekend. That's why Rachel was on a stepladder hanging multicolored lights across our porch when Victoria Harrington, Oakwood Heights HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood enforcer, decided to intervene physically. According to our neighbors, whom we'd meet properly only after the incident, Victoria had served as HOA president for 6 consecutive terms, running unopposed after systematically driving out or intimidating anyone who might challenge her authority. Her husband Bradley's position as executive VP at Capital Regional Bank gave her additional leverage over homeowners. Subtle reminders about mortgage approvals and refinancing rates were apparently common tactics in her enforcement arsenal. In the 4 weeks since we'd moved in, we'd received no fewer than 7 notices of violation. Our mailbox was apparently 2 inches taller than regulation height. The brass kick plate on our front door wasn't from the approved metallic finishes list. The stone pavers we'd added to create a small meditation area in the backyard hadn't gone through the proper approval process. Each notice came with Victoria's signature in thick black ink slashed across the bottom of the page like a declaration of war. Rachel had laughed them off, accustomed to navigating bureaucracy through her work with military and VA systems. "We've dealt with Pentagon red tape," she'd said, filing the notices in a folder labeled "Nonsense. This is amateur hour." I'd agreed, more amused than concerned. After coordinating multi-million-dollar logistics operations in active combat zones, HOA regulations seemed laughably insignificant. We didn't realize then how personally Victoria took these perceived challenges to her authority or how far she would go to assert control over her neighborhood. I reached Rachel's side in seconds, kneeling beside her on the cold concrete walkway. Years of emergency response training kicked in automatically as I quickly assessed her condition. My eyes scanned for immediate threats to life. Airway clear, breathing steady but rapid, circulation intact, though her pulse raced beneath my fingers. The small cut on her temple was bleeding, but not profusely. My primary concern was internal damage, particularly to the placenta or anything that might threaten our unborn child. "Don't move, sweetheart," I said, my voice calm despite the panic flooding my system, the same tone I'd used when coordinating emergency evacuations under fire. "Tell me where it hurts." Rachel gripped my hand, her dark eyes wide with fear, not for herself but for our unborn daughter. I could see the psychologist in her fighting against the natural human panic, applying her own clinical knowledge to stay present despite the shock and pain. "My back," she whispered, and I felt a twinge in my abdomen. "James, the baby." "She'll be fine," I assured her, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "We'll get you checked out right away." I pulled out my phone to call an ambulance, keeping my other hand firmly in hers. Dispatch confirmed an ambulance was being sent immediately. Estimated arrival time 4 minutes. Only then did I glance up at Victoria Harrington, who still stood on our porch, arms crossed over her cashmere sweater, looking down at us with an expression of annoyance rather than concern. The complete lack of remorse on her face ignited something dangerous inside me, a cold, tactical fury I normally reserved for combat situations. In 15 years of military service, I'd learned to control my emotions, to channel anger into focused action rather than impulsive reaction. But seeing my pregnant wife injured on our own property while this woman stood there checking her watch as if we were inconveniencing her schedule, it took every ounce of my professional discipline not to respond with the aggression my instincts demanded. "What exactly do you think you're doing calling an ambulance?" Victoria demanded, descending the stairs with the confident strut of someone who had never faced consequences for her actions. Her voice carried the practiced indignation of a person accustomed to intimidating others into compliance. She clearly tripped over those unauthorized decorations. I was simply informing her of the violation when she lost her balance. The blatant lie stunned me momentarily. I'd witnessed the entire incident from my car, watched as Victoria had deliberately placed both hands on my wife's shoulders and pushed with enough force to send Rachel tumbling backward. Yet here she stood, rewriting reality without hesitation, secure in her assumption that her version of events would prevail as it apparently always had in Oakwood Heights. I stood slowly, positioning myself between this woman and my wife. At 6'2", I towered over Victoria's petite frame, but she didn't back down an inch. Up close, I could see the meticulously applied makeup, the designer label on her coat, the diamond tennis bracelet that probably cost more than a month of my military salary. Everything about her projected wealth and entitlement, the armor she used to bully an entire neighborhood into submission. "You pushed my pregnant wife down the stairs," I stated flatly, my voice dangerously quiet. "Over Christmas lights." Victoria scoffed, flipping open a leather portfolio embossed with the Oakwood Heights logo in gold leaf. The inside was organized with color-coded tabs, an entire administrative system dedicated to documenting neighborhood infractions. "I was enforcing the HOA covenant that you signed when you purchased this property. Section 12, paragraph 4 clearly states that holiday decorations must adhere to the approved color scheme, silver and gold only, and cannot be displayed until December 1st at the earliest." She thrust a glossy printout toward me, her French manicured nail tapping against a highlighted paragraph. "These violations are subject to an immediate $500 fine, plus $100 for each day they remain uncorrected." I ignored the document, turning back to check on Rachel, who was trying to sit up despite my earlier instruction to stay still. Her medical training was clearly at odds with her physical discomfort. "Help me inside, James," she said through gritted teeth. "I think I'm okay. I just need to lie down." "An ambulance is already on the way," I told her gently, helping her to a more comfortable position. I removed my jacket and placed it under her head, careful not to move her more than necessary. "We're going to get you and the baby checked out. No arguments." My tone was gentle but firm, the same voice I used when giving non-negotiable orders that needed to sound like suggestions. I could see our neighbors beginning to peek through windows and blinds, drawn by the commotion but hesitant to get involved. Years of Victoria's reign had clearly conditioned them to stay out of neighborhood disputes. An elderly man across the street had his phone out, apparently recording the incident, but made no move to approach or offer help. Victoria's shrill voice cut through our conversation like a combat radio on full volume. "Excuse me, I am still speaking to you about these violations." Her heels clicked sharply against the concrete as she circled to position herself in my line of sight, clipboard thrust forward like a shield. "Your wife's dramatic overreaction doesn't change the fact that you're in breach of the covenant. Those lights need to come down today, or the fines will begin accumulating, and I'll need your insurance information. Your wife's fall has damaged community property." I followed her pointing finger to a small decorative planter that had been knocked over when Rachel fell. The plastic chrysanthemum inside was now slightly askew. The absurdity of her priorities in this moment was so extreme it momentarily short-circuited my anger, replacing it with disbelief. I felt my military training taking over, the ability to compartmentalize emotions and focus on the immediate tactical situation. In 15 years of service, I'd learned to identify threats, prioritize responses, and execute plans under intense pressure. In that moment, Victoria Harrington wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was an active threat to my family's safety and well-being, and I needed to neutralize that threat through appropriate channels. My wife needs medical attention because you physically assaulted her, I said, each word precisely measured as if explaining rules of engagement to a new recruit. In approximately 3 minutes, an ambulance will arrive, followed shortly by police officers who will take a statement about the assault they'll witness on our doorbell camera footage. I nodded toward the small security device mounted discreetly beside our front door, a high-definition camera with motion detection and cloud storage that had undoubtedly captured the entire incident in crystal-clear detail. Victoria's eyes darted to the camera, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her perfectly made-up face before she rallied. Her shoulders squared as she prepared her counterattack. That's absurd. I never touched her, and even if I did, which I didn't, I was simply protecting community standards that affect all our property values. Your tacky decorations decrease home values by up to 15%, according to the National Association of Realtors. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper that wouldn't carry to the gathering audience of neighbors. Her perfume, something expensive and cloying, wafted over me as she invaded my personal space. My husband is executive vice president at Capital Regional Bank. We finance half the mortgages in this neighborhood, including yours. He can make your life very difficult very quickly. One call from Bradley and your mortgage rate could double overnight. Is that really worth some cheap Christmas lights? In 15 years of military service, I had faced down insurgents, navigated diplomatic incidents, and coordinated extractions under enemy fire, all with less contempt than I felt for this woman threatening my family over Christmas decorations. I don't think you understand the situation you've created, I said quietly, pulling out my phone again. Your banking connections don't impress me. I scrolled through my contacts, finding the number I needed, and pressed call. Victoria watched with narrowed eyes, her French manicured nails tapping impatiently against her clipboard. General Blackwood, it's Jacques Ramirez. I paused, listening. Yes, sir. At my new place. Listen, I have an emergency situation. My wife Gretchel has been assaulted, pushed down our porch stairs. She's 7 months pregnant. Another pause. Yes, sir. 1422 Maple Lane in Oakwood Heights. The ambulance is already en route, but... I glanced at Rachel, who was pale but alert, one hand protectively curved around her belly. I'd appreciate any medical support from the convoy. We're concerned about potential complications with the pregnancy. I ended the call and turned back to Victoria, whose expression had shifted from smug certainty to confusion. Who was that? She demanded, though her voice had lost some of its edge. General Thomas Blackwood, base commander at Fort Preston and current operational lead for Operation Winter Guardian. I replied calmly, kneeling back down beside Rachel to check her pulse. He's currently overseeing a training exercise involving 5 military convoys transporting essential equipment. As it happens, they're passing less than 2 miles from here right now. Victoria gave a dismissive laugh, though it sounded hollow. You expect me to believe the U.S. military is going to intervene in an HOA dispute? Please, this pathetic attempt to intimidate me won't work. I'm still issuing the citation, and those lights need to come down immediately. She might have continued her tirade, but the distant sound of multiple heavy engines rumbling in unison cut her off. The sound grew rapidly louder, the distinctive growl of military transport vehicles moving with purpose. Within 3 minutes of my call, the first olive-drab Humvee turned into our quiet suburban street, followed by a military ambulance and a procession of transport trucks that stretched as far as the eye could see. Neighbors emerged from their homes, staring in disbelief as 5 full military convoys, over 30 vehicles in total, efficiently surrounded our cul-de-sac. General Thomas Steele Blackwood himself stepped out of the lead vehicle, his 6'4" frame impressive in full battle dress uniform. Behind him, A team of military medics deployed from the ambulance with practiced efficiency, medical kits in hand. The general strode directly to where Rachel lay, ignoring Victoria completely. He knelt beside her, his stern expression softening. "Dr. Ramirez," he said gently, "looks like you've had quite a fall. My medics are going to check you over until the civilian ambulance arrives, all right?" Rachel managed a weak smile. "Thank you, General. Bit of an overreaction to send the entire 5th Battalion, isn't it?" He chuckled. "We were already mobilized for the winter exercise. Just took a small detour." He turned to me, his expression grave. "What happened, Jax?" Before I could answer, Victoria inserted herself into the conversation, her initial shock giving way to indignation at being ignored. "Excuse me, this is a private residential area. You can't just bring military vehicles into a civilian neighborhood. I am the HOA president, and I demand that you remove these vehicles immediately." The general turned slowly, taking in Victoria with the same assessing gaze he used on foreign adversaries. "Ma'am, I'm General Thomas Blackwood, United States Army. And you are?" "Victoria Harrington, president of the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association," she announced, drawing herself up to her full height, which still left her looking up at the general's chest. "And you are trespassing on private property. These vehicles are blocking access and damaging our roads. I'll be filing a formal complaint with—" "Ma'am," the general interrupted quietly, "one of my officers' wives has been injured. A pregnant woman has been assaulted. At the moment, my only concern is her well-being and that of her unborn child." His tone was polite but left no room for argument. "My understanding is that you pushed Dr. Ramirez down these stairs. Is that correct?" Victoria's face flushed red. "That is a complete fabrication. She tripped while hanging unauthorized decorations. Colonel Ramirez is trying to avoid a citation by creating this circus." She gestured wildly at the military vehicles now lining both sides of the street. The general nodded to one of his aides, who approached with a tablet. "We've already accessed the security footage from the Ramirez's doorbell camera, sir," the young lieutenant said, handing over the device. "It clearly shows Ms. Harrington placing both hands on Dr. Ramirez's chest and pushing her backward off the porch." The general reviewed the footage, his expression darkening. Around us, several of Victoria's neighbors had gathered, watching the scene unfold with undisguised interest. The civilian ambulance had arrived, and paramedics were carefully transferring Rachel onto a stretcher while consulting with the military medics. "Ramirez," the general called, "go with your wife. We'll take care of things here." I nodded gratefully, moving to Rachel's side as they prepared to load her into the ambulance. She reached for my hand. "The lights," she whispered, a hint of her usual humor returning. They really were pretty. I smiled, kissing her forehead. "We'll put up twice as many when you get home, in every color of the rainbow." As I climbed into the ambulance beside Rachel, I heard the general addressing Victoria again. "Ms. Harrington, officers from the county sheriff's department are on their way to take your statement regarding the assault. I suggest you consider your position carefully. Assaulting a pregnant woman is a serious offense in any context." The last thing I saw before the ambulance doors closed was Victoria's face, pale with the first real signs of fear as she realized the full consequences of her actions. The doctors at Mercy General confirmed what we'd hoped. Both Rachel and our unborn daughter were going to be fine. The fall had resulted in some bruising and a mild muscle strain in Rachel's back, but no damage to the placenta or any signs of premature labor. She was prescribed bed rest for a week as a precaution, and we were sent home the following morning. When we pulled into our driveway, I was stunned by what awaited us. Our entire house had been transformed. Christmas lights, hundreds of them in every color imaginable, adorned our porch, windows, and roofline. A small army of people in military-issue winter gear was putting the finishing touches on what looked like a professional holiday display. Sergeant Diaz, my logistics deputy, spotted our car and jogged over with a grin. "Welcome home, sir, ma'am. Hope you don't mind." The guys wanted to help out. "This is incredible," Rachel breathed, tears welling in her eyes as she took in the winter wonderland our home had become. General's orders, Diaz explained with a wink, said something about proper force deployment in support of moral operations. The entire battalion pitched in. As I helped Rachel carefully from the car, I noticed several of our neighbors approaching, led by Ellen Reeves from across the street. Each carried something: casseroles, desserts, gift baskets. "We wanted to welcome you properly," Ellen said, her kind face creased with concern, "and to apologize for not stepping in sooner with Victoria. She's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, but none of us had the courage to stand up to her." "What happened with Victoria?" Rachel asked. Ellen's husband, David, stepped forward. "She's been charged with assault. The HOA board had an emergency meeting last night and voted unanimously to remove her as president." He handed me a thick envelope. "This is the new HOA charter we drafted last night. We've simplified the rules considerably, especially regarding holiday decorations." He smiled. "We're hoping you'll consider joining the board, Colonel. We could use someone with your organizational skills." Over the next few days, the story of Victoria's downfall spread throughout the community. Her husband, embarrassed by the incident and the military presence it had attracted, had moved out temporarily. Victoria herself had retreated to her sister's home in Maryland, facing not only criminal charges but the complete collapse of her social standing. The general visited us that weekend, bringing a hand-carved wooden rocking chair for the nursery. "A gift," he explained, "from all the officers who had served with me over the years. We protect our own, Jacks," he said simply. "Always have. Always will." Sitting on our front porch that evening, Rachel's head resting on my shoulder as we admired our spectacularly decorated home, I reflected on the strange series of events that had transformed our introduction to Oakwood Heights. "You know what's funny?" Rachel murmured, her hand guiding mine to feel our daughter's kicks. "Victoria actually did bring the neighborhood together, just not in the way she intended." She was right. In the weeks following the incident, our home had become a gathering place for neighbors who had previously lived in isolated fear of HOA reprisals. Children played on our lawn beneath the glow of our unauthorized lights. Families stopped by with homemade treats and offers of friendship. The community Victoria had ruled through intimidation was healing itself through connection. When our daughter Eliana was born 2 months later, healthy, strong, and precisely on her due date, the entire neighborhood celebrated with us. The new HOA board, which I had indeed joined despite my initial reluctance, unanimously voted to establish a small playground and community garden on the previously vacant lot at the center of our cul-de-sac. Victoria Harrington eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to community service and anger management classes. She sold her home in Oakwood Heights and moved to a downtown apartment with no HOA. Sometimes karma delivers its own justice. As for us, we found the home we'd always wanted, not just in the physical structure with its colorful Christmas lights, but in the community that had formed around it. A place where rules served people, not the other way around. A place where neighbors looked out for each other. That Christmas, Oakwood Heights held its first annual holiday lights competition. We didn't win. That honor went to the Johnson family with their amazing animated reindeer display. But no one seemed to care about the approved color palette anymore. Our cul-de-sac became famous throughout the county for its spectacular displays in every hue imaginable, and every year as we hang our multicolored lights, I remember how a moment of cruelty led to an unexpected blessing. A reminder that sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air and reveal what truly matters.